Hi everyone, we're just giving it a few more moments for some more of the registrants to join us, and we'll be starting in about 30 seconds. Good afternoon everyone. Welcome to this month's Wine Communicators of Australia webinar, which is titled Resilience. Welcome everyone. My name is Annabelle Mugford and I'm a Director at Wine Communicators of Australia. I'm also the Head of Wine Education and International Market Development at Barossa, Australia. I acknowledge that we are hosting this webinar from the traditional lands of the Ngadjuri, Peramunk and Kaurna people here in the Barossa. I also acknowledge the traditional custodians of the various lands on which you all work today and the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people participating in this webinar. I pay my respects to elders past and present and celebrate the diversity of Aboriginal peoples and their ongoing cultures and connections to the lands and waters of Australia. Today, our webinar discusses resilience and will be presented by Adam Przytula. Today's presentation may help you find out how to gain the ability to bounce back regardless of any problems that you might face in 2025. Adam is an international speaker and entrepreneur from Perth, Western Australia, and is the founder and director of Armed for Life and a published author. Adam's book, The Road to Resilience, was published by Wiley Publishing and released in February 2022. In 2014, Armed for Life won the Telstra Australian Business Award in the micro business category, along with a string of other awards in the years since. Adam runs Armed for Life full-time with a team of speakers and radically diverse members, including basketball players, hip-hop artists, parkour instructors and barbers for the 12 different programs that they run in and out of schools, as well as presenting on 30 different topics. Adam has been working with youth and adults for 20 years in some capacity, and always will have a passion for helping people dealing with the same issues that he struggled with himself. It is this passion, coupled with his sense of humour, complete honesty about his own experiences, a strong element of vulnerability, and very practical steps to making change, which causes students and adults to engage so well when he speaks. We have allowed plenty of time for any questions you may have to be answered at the end of the webinar. However, feel free to send them through to me as they come to mind. You can do this via the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. As usual, this webinar will be recorded and a link for this recording will be sent to you should you wish to watch the content again at a later stage. It is now my great pleasure to hand over to today's presenter, Adam.
Thanks, Annabelle. And thank you for the introduction. I know I did something, gosh, when was it? The beginning of December last year. So some of you may have heard some of my story before. I don't know who has and who hasn't. So I will just kind of start by sharing my story and experience only because it's so much a part of the presentation. The whole idea of trying to share with the same things that I've struggled with. I had zero resilience growing up as a kid and as a teenager, in fact, even as a young adult, because it just wasn't a skill that I acquired, and it made everything so much worse. Primary school was decent because I was the fast kid for 4 years. Being the fastest in a decently sized primary school means that you're popular and everyone wants to talk to you, everyone wants to be your friend. And that was good because I didn't experience, I guess, not a physically unsafe home, but I certainly didn't feel safe. Mum was emotionally abusive, and Dad was absent. And Dad being the one that I felt more connected to, and I knew he loved me, but he was never there. So the combo of abusive and absent parenting meant that I really struggled at home. And I get to school, and I was a fast kid, and I was achieving in that and finding my identity and my value, feeling popular. All of the buzz that you get from being the fastest, etc. And then I lost it in year four. It's in the family. We've got eczema and asthma in the family, but I ended up with eczema so bad that it basically, these little bubbles covered both of my feet, which made it hard to walk, let alone run. And so I was given cortisone tablets or injections. Mum and Dad tell me different stories. Being on the roids in year four doesn't end well for anybody. So I doubled in size. I gained a whole bunch of weight really quickly. I kind of remember being overnight, but clearly that's not the case. But it meant that I wasn't the fast kid anymore. And not only had I lost that status and my identity and my sense of value and worth, but the bullying started. And so that kind of just compounded onto everything else. And so school shifted from being great to just being a bit meh. Um, and I was offered a place over here in WA, the advanced classes in primary school called PIAC. So I was offered a place in the PIAC program. So I thought, well, can't be a fast kid, maybe I can be a smart kid. That kind of at least gave me an identity, and I kind of just coasted. But then year seven, I chose the wrong friends. Basically, a game of basketball turned to a game of keepy, off from the fact that I caught up to the guy who had the ball. That didn't turn out very well because he had some anger issues, and he just started throwing punches, and all my friends jumped in. And so then they bullied me for the next 2 months. So I chose the wrong friends. So going into year eight, I didn't trust anyone. I didn't find friends in the middle of year nine. So I was an open target for bullying. And it's basically because I didn't trust anyone. And the bullying started day one, and it didn't stop until I left school. And by the end of year 12, 180 students, about 85, 90 guys. There were 58 guys who were bullying me every single day. Um, every class, every break, everywhere I went. Being in year eight, my brother, one older brother, was in year 12. His mates would call me down the back of the bus and slam my head against the bus window and choke me with my tie and throw me over the bus seats. So it was everywhere. And then my parents divorced in the middle of year eight. So everything kind of came crashing down within the space of about 12 months. And I just didn't recover. I shut down emotionally, mentally. Mum left, dad disappeared even further into work. So he'd leave at 6 in the morning, get home about 12 o'clock at night, and then just work around the house on the weekends. This old school Polish generation, you love your family by working for them, and there's no connection. And then my brother graduated and he left. And so I essentially grew up alone. My grandma was my saving grace. She would come over in the morning, bring me breakfast in bed to get me out of bed. And when I got home in the afternoon, she was there in the kitchen making me dinner. But then we'll go home and look after my sick granddad who had Parkinson's. And so I kind of grew up alone too. So there was this gamut of issues and problems that I faced. And because I didn't have resilience, I just fell apart with all of them. As we're going to talk and discuss through the course of this presentation, what we boil it, I like simplifying things, and what we boil it down to is the fact that resilience really comes down to whether we're reacting or responding to our problems. There's lots of other elements that go along with it. Look, the reality is that what I've realized, just even the last couple of months, is that when we started Arm for Life 13 years ago, resilience was a buzzword. And so it's been a buzzword for a long time. And so even year sevens are kind of like giving me all the answers and the things that we're kind of, some of the things that we discuss or address, at least because it's been discussed for a long time. But what we do with Arm for Life is take the simple things and make them practical. So how do we put this into practice? How do we develop this as a skill so that we can get better at it? Because high school didn't get better for me. It just kept getting worse and worse. The anxiety and depression caused me to shut down. By the middle of year 10, I had a plan in place to take my own life. I got to the end of year 12 and almost failed. I passed by about 2%. So I got out of school. And my brother was second to Ducks advanced classes in primary school, remember? So it extremely affected my experience of school. And I got out of school and joined a team going into schools because I couldn't get into any university courses. And partway through the first year, I had a turning point and realized I was desperately in need of help and no one was there to give it. So everything that we do with Arm for Life started in schools, but it's organically spilling out. We did a 6-month resilience and well-being program for Western Power. last year, which is a major power company over here in WA. When I come over to Melbourne next, I'm meeting with the president for the North Melbourne Football Club. One of the ex-captains is coming on as an ambassador and doing stuff. And it's cool that it's kind of naturally spilling out and doing lots more. And yes, for community, so that we can provide what we're doing in schools outside of schools. But I just like that it's kind of spilling into the adult space, because it probably hit me maybe 3 years ago that I went down to, drove about an hour and a half to do a 25-minute building resilience in kids presentation for parents. And I stayed for the day because I had to drive, for a decent amount to get to the 25-minute presentation. And every parent that came to me and said, look, I got something for my kids, but I really needed to hear that today. And that's where the penny dropped, that it doesn't matter how old we are. We don't automatically acquire the skill of resilience once we become an adult. It's either something that we have worked on, or maybe we, to a degree, have some components naturally and automatically. There's still things to work on. So, for me, the journey as an adult meant that I left after 2 years of volunteering to get a real job, according to my dad. I came back as a coordinator. 6 months later, started speaking. So it's actually been 25 years that I've been speaking overall. I did that for about 7 years, pulled away to get my teaching degree, became a chaplain in a school, still working on the ground with young people. Towards the end of my degree, saw a kid walk past me that reminded me of me. This is the summarized version. And I decided I wasn't going to teach, even though I have a lot of respect for teachers. Just wanted to reach to go further. So finished my degree, got a high distinction, started forming Afterlife because I had no idea what I was doing. I don't have a background in business, even though my dad was a very successful businessman, couldn't answer any of my questions. Launched in 2012 with 4 topics and just me. So now 13 years in, there's over 50 team members, 25 topics, 10 programs, 5 of them are functional currently. 2 camps that we do every year. Starting to travel around, so looking at Melbourne, Adelaide. That's going to happen, just don't know when. Sydney is happening about once a quarter at the moment. So, and I went to South Africa in 2020, and that's on the cards for this year as well. So I don't know where it's going to go, but my core drive of just wanting to help kind of means that you couldn't pay me any amount of money to do anything else. And when I went to South Africa in 2020, the guy who's about as busy as I was had written 2 books. I was like, how did you do this? I used a ghostwriter. Oh, you cheated. But that means that I can also cheat. So I came back to Perth, found a ghostwriter, worked for about 2.5 years. We ended up going to self-print, and I went to another book launch for Wiley Publishing, the guys that did Barefoot Investor, and just to learn what we can do for ours. And she was like, oh, you should send the manuscript to Wiley Publishing, because I'd recently met her, the author. And I was like, once I realized who they were, I was like, yeah, fine. But we continued on with our journey. And I just emailed and said, we've got 7 days before we got to go to print. In 2 days, I said we want it. So yeah, the book's been around for 3 years now. It's called The Road to Resilience. And so you can get this anywhere, Mix, Amazon, Booktopia, etc. But it just means that there's a resource there that we can leave afterwards. And I've had more positive responses from adults than from young people, even though that was kind of the demographic that I wrote it for. I think because it's just so helpful and just simple. So I'll be drawing stuff from here, as we're talking about resilience. But let's dive in and let's talk about. I like defining things when we're talking about anything. The reality is that resilience is necessary for everyone because it has to do with their problems, and everyone is guaranteed to face problems. That's ultimately why resilience matters so much. And in a little bit, we're going to see, just how much it matters. But one of the definitions is the ability to recover quickly from illness or misfortune. The word recovery here is key. When when something happens to me, you could even say illness or misfortune, how quickly it takes us to get better after getting sick, how resilient our immune system is. The word recovery here is key, and we'll come back to that as well. The ability to cope with stress or adversity. Now, when I'm face to face, I ask people, what stresses you out? I'm sure we'd have a myriad of answers. I can't see the chat right now because I haven't set up my screen properly. So when we get to Q&A time, I'm going to have to work a little bit to get rid of the PowerPoint. But had I thought about that, I would have gone, chuck it in the chat and we can talk about what stresses you out. But it's usually family, relationships, money, kids. There are certain things that tend to stress us out. And there's actually this, I guess, resource that you would call a stress scale. that health experts, psychs, and counselors in the past have used that have a list of things that we go through in life that cause stress. Everything's scored out of 100. So you've got the things on the top of the list are the most difficult things you ever face. Death, divorce, abuse, all sit at the top. They're all scored 97 out of 100 and are dependent on your experience or past experience or what you've been through, or probably determine which one would impact you more. But they're all scored 97 out of 100. Before I even knew what resilience was, about 20 years ago, I had someone say to me that it takes the most resilient of people 3 to 4 years to get back to who they were when they go through a divorce, for example. So you could take that and apply it to all three of those things at the top. As you move down the list, when we run our stress management presentation, by the way, we kind of go into the fact that there are two different types of stress, internal and external, and you can't control the external. So it's important to focus on the internal, which has more to do with inflammation, and there's a whole another conversation there. As you move down the list on the stress scale, you've got things like tests, even as adults, 75 out of 100, 60 out of 100 is moving house. If you've done that recently, you all understand and concur with that. 50 out of 100, apparently, for parents is buying Christmas presents. You could say that has to do with parking and shops, especially if you live it to the day before, which I tend to do. But it could be monetary. As you move down the list, you've got things that shouldn't bother us. And look, the stuff that I go through at the bottom of the list is different based on age, right? For young people, dying in a game, I make the statement that if you die in a game, if you have kids here, then you could probably understand. If you have a kid that is a gamer, or maybe a partner that is a gamer, and they die in a game and they want to burn their house down, that's a problem, right? The idea that we have big reactions to small problems, that's essentially kind of what we're talking about here. When we hit these things on the bottom of the list, they shouldn't bother us. But if I am in an overwhelmed state, or if I'm in a super stressed state, or there's other things that are going on, we can be easily triggered, let alone past traumas and things that actually trigger us. If we are ultimately, the overarching comment is, if we are falling apart, if we are reacting to the things on the bottom of the list, when we finally hit the top, we don't recover. That's ultimately why resilience matters for everybody. I know someone when they were 12 and 14, they hit two of the top three. They didn't talk about it. They didn't have any resilience. They just started kind of self-medicating, got married young, had kids young, divorced young, cycled through about 30, 40 years of alcoholic, toxic relationships. And finally, in their 60s, settled down what I think is their first healthy relationship, because there was no resilience. It ultimately means, if I'm reacting to the things on the bottom of the list, I don't recover and go back to the original statement. And that really matters, because it means we are changed, not in a good way, for the rest of our lives. And so much of this applies to work, any type of work, right? If little things happen, small things happen in the workplace, and I don't have resilience, then I'm reacting to those things. Not only does that deem me as a reactive person, but it means that we are damaging relationships, and then it changes our frame, our frame of mind for the rest of the day for work. It has a huge, I guess, ripple effect for even the way that individuals work in the workplace. Then we come to the standard definition, which I do like, the ability to bounce back from problems. I like it because of the picture that it gives us. So 14 years ago, almost 15 years ago, I had a motorbike. I had a black Kawasaki Ninja 250. It was beautiful. It's like my baby before the first baby came out. I have a 13-year-old, 4-year-old, 1-year-old. To explain my children, my 13-year-old is like the perfect child. He literally is the kindest kid you'll ever meet. Like, other kids are drawn to him. Just, I was going to say he's like me, but then that makes me sound like I'm big noting myself. He's all the good of me. So there's so many wonderful qualities there, and I've worked on purpose to try and help him so he doesn't go down the same path that I did. My 4-year-old is a weapon, so the 13-year-old completely hooked into me, and then the 4-year-old came along and changed everything. Maggie then talks about lambs and roosters. I have the quintessential lamb and then a quintessential rooster. The jury's out on the 1-year-old. Maybe a mix of both. We'll see. But before my 13-year-old was born, I had a deal with my ex of an accident I never get to ride again. Like, I would take that deal because I had a plan. I was going to ride the rest of my life. I knew what bike I was going to get, how many cc's it was. I could picture myself in my 60s riding my motorbike because I loved it. I really enjoyed it once I started. And then it took 6 months, and I got hit by a truck. So doing 60 Ks down the main street in my suburb, cement truck pulled out in front of me. I had a second to react. And so I hit the brake, inexperienced rider, and I turned too quickly. I mean, I was either going to hit head on or side on, because my skid mark was literally about that long. And so I hit on from this angle doing 60 Ks. My chest hit the door, so I had some deep, dark purple, brown, yellow bruising. But my foot was crushed in between the bike and the truck. So my foot pedal was bent down like that. My foot was in between that and the truck. Smash fall. I look up, he's driving away, had no idea we collided, and I start crawling forwards to get his attention. And then the pain hit my foot and I rolled onto my back and I started screaming for 20 minutes until the ambulance got there. Then I got the drugs up nose and I was like, because that's what they're meant to do. But if I'm in person, I would be like, well, do you think I could stand up in that 20 minutes? No. The reality is that the pain was overwhelming. It wasn't even a thought about standing up because I was in so much pain. Out of everything that we address and every topic that we speak on out of the 25, resilience and self-esteem are the two that are most closely linked. And in fact, the two that is the most important, because our self-esteem, how you feel about yourself, determines where my resilience is at to a degree. Because it determines everything. It determines how we see things, how we receive correction, what our relationships are like, who we choose in our relationships, how we allow people to treat us. It determines everything. When I have a low self-esteem, it means I'm already in pain, right? And so when I'm already in pain, I get knocked down, I can't bounce back. And so that's why they're so interlinked, because our self-esteem determines our level of resilience to a degree. Better example is that beginning of 2023, so I don't have an ACL. I injure myself a lot. As you can see, I think I've torn my bicep. There's a long story there. I like doing things. I'm a physical guy, and it's been the case. And I'm also clumsy. So I've torn my ACL twice playing basketball. I don't have an ACL right now. I still play without it. Leg's totally fine. I've rehabbed without it, and second time around. But I strap it when I'm doing anything really physical. And there's this adult size inflatable water park here in Perth. It's massive. You couldn't get to the whole thing in an hour. And I went at the beginning of 2023 for a family member's birthday, and I strapped my knee, thinking I need to protect my knee. And so there was a section where there's this inflatable platform and this thin inflatable beam and another platform over here. Obviously, the goal was to run across and make it on the other side. No one was making it, not the waffle player in the family, not the high-level soccer player in the family. I'm like, I can do this. And so I ran across and I landed with my left foot, and my right one's the one with the torn ACL. But I landed outstretched, and then I did the splits. As soon as my foot hit it, slipped forwards. My wife immediately laughed, and then she saw how much pain I was in. It turns out that you have three muscles in your hamstring. I didn't know this, and didn't get into human biology when I was a teenager. And I tore two of them and my adductor. So 9 centimeter tear right down the middle of the middle hamstring muscle. So the bruising was severe. I should put it, I keep saying I want to put it in the presentation because it's the worst bruise I've ever seen. It ran from the middle of my hamstring down to the middle of my calf because the blood was just draining for about a week or two. 7 days in, I walk in having spoken in school all day. My legs are aching. I've got my laptop bag in my hand, and my then 2-year-old, now 4-year-old, remember the weapon. Any given afternoon, I open the door. There's this big hallway down to the garage, and he literally runs the entire way and either jumps into my arms for a hug or he slaps me. I never really know which one's coming. It tends to be a hug more so now than ever before, which I'm glad about. Both are affectionate from his perspective. I certainly appreciate one more than the other. But this particular afternoon, 7 days in, I open the door. He's halfway down already. So I turn this way to put my laptop bag down. And as I turn, he comes flying in and slaps me in the back of the hamstring where my bruise was. I dropped like a sack of potatoes and kind of laid in the fetal position for about 5 minutes, waiting for the pain to go away. You okay, Dad? I couldn't speak. The concept here is that I was already bruised. I was already in pain. If we're already in pain, right? There's past trauma, there's stuff I'm going through right now, whether it's home or work or friends, or there's a situation that I can't resolve, etc. If I'm already in pain, it's like it's like having a bruise, carrying a bruise or an open wound. And when you get hit by a problem, anytime I do something with my arm right now, it hurts a lot. anytime I try and pick something up, or there's certain movements that I can't do. And it's like searing pain for about 2 or 3 minutes. And so the idea that we kind of do in the background have to work on our self-esteem and how we feel about ourselves to better our resilience, because they go hand in hand. But when we get down into the nitty-gritty, experts around the world talk about there are people. Judith Rodin, who was an ex-CFO for Rockefeller Foundation, ended up traveling around the world talking about building resilient cities. And she talks about it has 3 stages. The third stage is really a reviewing stage. The core really exists in the 2 stages. And this is just a bit of a sidestep to those stages that she talks about. We have a preparation stage and the rebounding stage. The rebounding stage tends to be about what we do in the moment when we're facing the problem, again, because we're talking about problems. The preparation stage you can work on now, right? The more of these cushions or shields that we refer to in the preparation stage that you have, the better prepared you are, so the easier it is to bounce back. And they are all connected to self-esteem to a degree. So the 3 cushions or shields that we talk about, and the way that I describe these, I was wearing all the gear when I was riding my motorbike, except the boots. I was wearing my cool blue Adidas shoes because I like my cool shoes. And it's like the difference between me wearing my cool blue shoes or a motorcycle boot in relation to the motorbike accident. These 3 things act as each of them acts as another separate layer of protection. And if we have all 3 of them, we get hit by a problem, it doesn't hurt as much. And so the first cushion or shield that we talk about in relation to preparation is relationships. What type of relationships do we have around us? We can have a better conversation about this than I have with young people, because I can kind of talk about the details, but I can't go into the nitty gritty. And there's not a whole lot of time to go into the detail. We have a whole session on healthy relationships. But the concept of, as an adult, what are relationships like? And even the dynamic of what we talk about in this space, well, changes as an adult, because we, especially for guys, we look at the rates of loneliness, right, connected to mental health issues and depression, etc. We know statistically they skyrocket from 40s onwards, because as relationships tend to dwindle, we don't really replace them. That can be the same for women, but we know women talk more. That's very stereotypical. Apologies if that offends you, but my wife is definitely the talker, and even though it sounds like I'm the talker, I'm an introvert. I recharge on my own. Give me my me time every day, please. She was like, give me people, because she recharges with people. Um, Whereas in terms of being connected, right? Statistics point towards the fact that men tend to struggle to connect more, and when they lose them, often don't replace them. And the relationships we have around us are incredibly key. And after this screen, we're going to see what we develop, or what I developed as a result of this, and as a result of going through a divorce 10 years ago, was what I call the inner circle. The relationships that we have around us, the 3 kind of different circles that describe the different types of relationships that we have, and then what we call the inner circle, the people that we have closest to us, that we trust, that we can share anything to. And we all need 2 to 5 people in that inner circle at any given stage of our lives. Whether it's, for kids, we talk about 5 fingers, or 5, adults, hopefully mum and dad, or an adult, a close adult is in that space for little kids, for teenagers. Yeah, we can have friends in there, but there needs to be adults in there. Obviously, if it's adults, it's going to be adults. So what friends or what family members do we have around that fall into that space? Maybe there's a therapist too, because my perspective is that everyone in the world needs to go see a counselor or a psych at some point, because we're all messed up. Everyone struggles. Everyone goes through something difficult at some point. We have developed over time this concept that there's something wrong with talking to a therapist. You're weird. There's something wrong with you. I think it's absolutely necessary, because we all struggle at some point. We live long enough. We're all going to go through those top 3 things on the stress scale, right? We're all going to go through the most difficult things you can possibly face, which means it should be normal. It should be like, oh, now it's my time to go see a psych or go see a therapist. And so I've seen 3 over the course of my life. In my 20s, the first one, I had a turning point when I was 18 and saw a counsellor at 24, saw a psych at 33. And then end of 2023, my brother's a high-level psych, he's second in charge at ECU. And I said to him, bro, I'm not okay. And I'm struggling. I'm the resilience guy, and I'm not okay. And, I was very open and honest about that and shared some stuff online about it and how, like, it's okay not to be okay. I've been Are You Okay ambassador for 4 years, and that's my spin on it, is that it's okay not to be okay. We just don't want to stay that way. And so, okay, I'm here. I don't want to stay this way. So I sought out a really good psych here in Perth and journeyed for about 7 or 8 months overall. Here's the reason why I'm still doing what I'm doing and why I'm essentially okay now. So healthy relationships, who is in the inner circle? I'm going to show you that in a couple of minutes. The second thing we talk about is understanding ourselves, or what we refer to as self-awareness. The idea of just tuning into ourselves and becoming more aware of our emotions. This is a very emotionally driven point. Am I aware of how often I get angry, how often I'm sad, how often anxiety tends to take over? We have to start to tune in and start to become more aware, whether that's journaling or talking to a therapist or whatever it is. Going through the divorce 10 years ago, that was the psych that I saw, pulled out some stuff in me that I had no idea was there. And that completely changed. I was a really codependent person in relationships, and now I'm not, because that awareness enabled me to change it. And that self-awareness component often allows us to change the problems that we're facing. Again, we're talking about problems that we've been facing over and over again that we have no idea is there. We just take relationships. I always share this because I love it. I remember listen to a podcast about a woman who had talking to a psych and saying, Doctor, I've had 7 different relationships with 7 different men and they've all ended terribly. He's like, no, no, no. You've had the same relationship with 7 different men. What you're doing and don't realize you're doing is that because of your relationship with your dad, you are subconsciously, without realizing it, you're recreating these relationships to fix it, to get it right, but you don't know you're doing it. And so you keep re-traumatizing yourself every time you step into these relationships. And for me personally, I was like, because for 18 years, codependency, choosing the same type of person, narcissistic and manipulative, blah, 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 because there was commonality there. And I was recreating what I experienced when I was younger. Self-awareness enabled me to shift it about 80% of what I was experiencing. There's still more to learn, as there is for everybody. So healthy relationships, self-awareness enables us to avoid the problems before they even happen. And then our thoughts. What type of thoughts are we thinking about ourselves? This is the key self-esteem point that we address when we talk about self-esteem. How do you think about yourself? I'm a loser, I'm ugly, I'm fat, no one likes me, no one cares about me. They are all better at me than doing this job, etc. Whatever negative thoughts, we know how powerful our thoughts are. They are ridiculously powerful. The ability to, and again, we're not going to be completely rid of our negative thoughts. That's really important to understand. There are organizations that push happiness. The happiness should be the goal. I think that's trash. It doesn't work, because then what if we feel sadness or anxiety or even anger? We feel bad, we feel guilt, etc. Because we're feeling negative thoughts, we try and get rid of them as soon as we can, so that we get stuck in the negative thoughts and emotions. It's okay to have negative thoughts. We just want more positive than negative. And if either of these acts as another layer of protection, where are my relationships at? What about my emotions? Am I aware of them? Am I tuned into my emotions? If you have self-awareness, you tend to be more aware of others too, which is a massive bonus when it comes to relationships and work. And then our thoughts, how do we think about ourselves? And if we bring it back to our relationships, we call the relationship circles that I developed 10 years ago. You have your acquaintances, the people that you know, everyone in the office, everyone in your world that you know by name is an acquaintance. Facebook really should be called acquaintances, not friends, because they're people you just know by name. But then the friends and the family in that middle circle where you are a bit closer, still relatively shallow. We don't talk about everything, right? I'm talking the inner circle is the 2 to 5 people that you feel completely yourself with. You be completely honest and open and real about what you're experiencing, about your hardships, about where I'm struggling, about how I feel inadequate, about my insecurities, whatever it is. They know us to that level, and we can be completely honest. And if there is no one in the inner circle, it's going to be the first thing you change. We absolutely, at any given point, need people in our inner circle where we can be completely real and honest with. It's incredibly important. And then, helping our kids to understand this, helping our friends and people that we know to understand this, that they have to have people in that inner circle at any given point. You know, I developed this 10 years ago, and I crammed 8 friends in the inner circle going through the divorce, and 3 of them lasted as the kind of the core people. And for me, I've lost all 3. I'm in this stage at 45. I'm kind of rebuilding the inner circle now, right? Because I know I could just not do anything about it and go on with my work, and I'll just become one of the statistics that isn't connected to people. And I'm not going to struggle as a result of that. One of my inner circle married a Canadian and moved to Canada. Betrayal, not really. We still talk from time to time, and I still love him. He's my oldest friend. And then another friend got into a relationship with someone who's so highly anxious. No one's seen him for 2.5 years. He literally doesn't leave the house. His businesses are folded, and I haven't seen him. And the other one who really pulled me out of my dark spaces, who was had a PhD in psychology and 98% ATAR, and she passed away, took her own life a couple of years ago now. And so this for me has become more important now, especially in this last 2 years, going, everyone needs someone in there in a circle, everybody at any given point, because we don't want those scenarios or circumstances. And for ourselves personally to understand this, okay, I need people in my inner circle. And the people around us, we care about them. We need them to understand that as well. It's just such a simple point to understand, but important to act on, to not leave and put by the wayside. I'll get to that when things get tough. Sometimes it's too late at that point. So that's why it's a part of the preparation stage, and we need to work on this now. And then we have the rebounding stage. In the face of the problem, what do we do about this? How do we be proactive about this? And this is where we come to the reactive versus responsive part of the conversation. I grew up as a really angry kid, punching holes in doors, breaking Xbox controllers. The last time I punched something, I was 27. We're talking a long time ago because I'm pretty old, but 18 years ago, walked out from a fight with my ex. I punched the porta potty. They're not soft. Don't punch porta potties. I think I broke something in my hand. It was sore for like 6 months. I remember sitting, it was like a movie scene, right? It's raining, I'm crying. I think I ripped my shirt. I'm dramatic. And I was like, I can't do this anymore. I remember having this moment of thinking about how there's anger in my dad and there's anger in his dad. And I don't want to pass this on. I have to draw a line in the sand. I have to figure this out. I have to figure out, what's triggering me. Why do I feel reaction? And it's so funny how I think is it recently. I think just one of those real quick clips. Gabor talked about how uh, anytime there's a reaction, it's basically, or there's a trigger, there is a past trauma we haven't dealt with. And so it's really, this is the whole self-reflection, self-awareness thing of kind of going a little bit internal and going, okay, so what does set me off? What's there for me? And I know there was relationship stuff there for me. It's why I started seeing someone at the end of 2023. Because that anger, because it's so deep-seated for me, it still comes out from time to time. But with my 13-year-old, I would sit down and I explain to him and say, this is why I get angry. This is not who I want to be. I'm owning it. I'm showing that I have awareness around it so that I can kind of model to him because I want him to learn so he's not like me. The whole concept of learning to respond means that we're not controlled by those emotions. It's why the self-awareness matters so much, to become aware of those emotions, right? If I'm an angry person, if I'm reacting all the time, I cannot be resilient. The two cannot coexist at the same time, which means that if I'm recognizing I'm reactive, there can be seasons of it. But if it's been for a long time, then it's something that I have to look towards and address. So how do we do that? So we've talked about the preparation stage. The rebounding stage involves 3 decisions. And we're saying, okay, let's look at an example in the face of the problem, right in the moment. Let's take the example that we'll use a silly one. You're driving around looking for a car park. It's Christmas time. You've been driving around for 20 minutes. And finally you find one and someone steals it right at the last second, right? Most people would struggle to remain calm in that space. There's the overwhelm, there's the rushing, because we're all rushing nowadays. Someone's stolen it. It's not right. It's not just. What I've recognized, especially in me, is that the only time the anger tends to come out now, I've been able to pull it back with basketball, is when it's unjust, when the call isn't right, it's not fair, it's not just. And I think somewhere else along the line, I saw someone say that when there is trauma, there is a real kind of strong drive for justice in people, which I find really interesting because anyone I know that I can think of is like that. So am I. And so, yeah, it might feel unjust. It's not fair. It's not right. My emotions take over. Basically, we have to learn to stay calm in that moment. You have to have a tool belt of things you can lean upon that are going to help you to manage the emotions, right? So we have to not allow the emotions to control us. Don't make decisions based on those emotions. Every single emotion is valid, right? Every one of them is important. Anxiety, anger, sadness, they all have a place. Again, we just don't want to be stuck in them or controlled by them. And so if I am not controlled by my emotions, I have the ability to stay calm. If my emotions are in control, I tend to get angry and bang, I'm in reactive and I can't respond. At any point in these three stages or three decisions, if I kind of lose control, then I'm in a reactive category. So number one is I stay calm. If I feel anger rising, I get out of situations because I don't want to explode. Everyone who has an anger problem knows there's like an explosion point, like a boiling point for water. We have an explosion point. Part of our brain flips open. Chemicals get released into our brain. It's hard to control what we do or say. Get out before that happens. Um, have a prearranged, thing that you agree upon with a partner or with in work, etc. I got to get out of the situation. Do what works for you to stay calm or to calm down. For me, it's beach, prayer, certain kinds of music, um, workout, gym, basketball. Funnily enough, now because I don't care anymore. Um, Whereas, and even gaming, because I grew up addicted to gaming, and so I die in a game and rage quit all the time. Now my brain just kind of shuts down, and I get in a little bit of inactive mode in my brain, so I'm able to then kind of come out of it afterwards and be a whole lot calmer. Figure out what that is for you, like a tool belt. What can I lean on when I'm in that space? Once I get out, that I can calm down with. Then I come back and do step 2 and 3, which is problem solve. Play the movie forward. What happens if I do this? Right. The old school example, which I think is still around because kids tell me that they're still around, is choose your own adventure books. I used to love these books, right? But obviously, I get to the end of a page. If you want to do this, go to page 48. If you want to do this, go to page 65. I'd go to both pages, go, oh, I like this one. And then I'd make that decision. Life doesn't work that way. We have to be able to think, use imagination, play the movie forward and go, what happens if I do this? Old school would be click fast forward on the remote. Now it's slide the streaming bar across. Where does this go if I do this? Am I willing to face that consequence if the consequence comes? And so, in that moment, if someone's stolen I want to get out, I want to yell abuse. It could turn to, argument, even worse, a fist fight. Road rage happens all the time. They might have a weapon. You never know, right? That's the thing. We have to use our imagination to go, where did this go? Yelling at my kids. What happens with that? What happens to their self-esteem and how they feel about themselves? And even though they might be really frustrating, there are absolutely other ways. And again, it's really important to understand even anytime we're talking about anything, especially with parenting, no one's perfect. We're not going to get it right all the time. We just want to be moving towards getting better all the time. So play the movie forward. What happens? What are the consequences? When I talk to young people, I talk about getting bullied and you can physically react or verbally react or respond. And if you physically react, um, there are consequences for that. We take a guy into schools who has a brain injury, who got hit in the head 3 years ago, with brain damage, coma for 3 weeks, had to learn to walk again for 7 months. So it's really important to kind of get this information across. And are we putting it into practice? Generally speaking, for ourselves, stay calm, problem solve. What are the possible options? What are the consequences as a result? And then choose what's right. We are wired to choose what makes us feel good. Brain automatically wants to go back to what's normal, what we do all the time. If we're trying to make a change, that makes it even harder. But there's a psychiatrist, clinical psychiatrist. I don't know if he's alive anymore. His name's Dr. Tim Jennings. There's videos online of him talking and sharing presentations. Probably for me personally, I've gravitated towards the way he talks about the mind and the brain better than anybody else. And what I don't go into detail with young people is that he talks about there are basically two drivers behind the decisions that we make: love or fear. And we're never meant to make decisions out of fear unless our life is in danger. If life is in danger, fear can save your life. Outside of that, we're never meant to make decisions out of fear, yet we do it all the time. Fear of rejection, fear of this, fear of that, fear of pain, fear of whatever. We're not meant to make decisions out of fear. And so if we pull back and put it in the context of building resilience and rebounding, stay calm, problem solve, We have to choose what's right. We have to make a decision. He says there's 7 levels of the mind when it comes to decisions. The top 2 levels are reasoning and conscience. The bottom level is emotions. Never make decisions out of emotions. The top 2 levels, reasoning, we just talked about that. Played the movie before. What happens if we do this? And our conscience is an inner leading between right and wrong. And that forms our judgment. We are meant to make decisions based on our judgment. Stay calm, problem solve, and then choose what's right. Lean on our judgment, not on our emotions. We do that more and more and more. We put it into practice. That's how we become more resilient. That's how we choose and we learn to respond to our problems, not being controlled by our emotions and reacting. I forgot these are in here. These are just stills. The guy that we take in the schools. Because he was a top 50 Indigenous players for AFL in the country at 14. His dad passed away at 16 and went down this path. So I'm just going to skip past these and
Hi,
finish on this.
Adam.
Yeah.
Adam, sorry to interrupt. We can't see your slides.
What about now? There was a
No, we still
video,
can't
so it
see
might
them.
have switched off. Nothing's.
Right.
Is
That's
it back?
okay. You seem to be doing really well without the presentation. So why don't you just keep going?
Have we done this whole presentation without slides? Oh,
Yes. That's okay. You've got it.
that sucks. Okay. Um, I would really like to change that because we have a resilience scale that I want to show everybody. That is really unfortunate. I've been presenting thinking that you can see everything on my screen, which was working before, Annabelle. That's technology for you. Um, Basically, the way we finish this is we talk about um, the difference between, or at least knowing when to reach out for help. So we have what's called a resilience scale. So you haven't seen the relationship circles. You can't see the resilience scale right now. I'll try and reshare it afterwards. I don't know what to do while we're maybe doing Q&A. Either way, I'll be able to send the resilience scale and the relationship circles through via email so that you guys can see them, even use them as a resource. Imagine a scale from 0 to 10. And that scale essentially came about because of my son, Kale, 13-year-old. When he was born, he was on the top of the chart for height and weight. He was a very large baby. By the time he was 6 months old, he was off the chart for weight. There was no weight no chart for his weight. He was huge. By the time he was 12 months old, he was so big he couldn't crawl. It was like a beach whale. Like his gut was so big he couldn't push himself off the ground. That's how heavy he was. By the time he was 18 months old, he was 20 kilograms. Health nurses were freaking out. What are you doing to your child? Feeding him normal food. He said, literally, he's like almost too skinny now. He's a total normal looking kid, leaned out as any 13 going on 14-year-old would look like. So at 18 months old, we got a trampoline. There was a split in the net. It was free, so I took it. I'm a dad. I could do stuff. I epically failed. I used safety pins. I was tired. Um, but I angled the split where the grass was just in case he happened to fall out. But I always stand at the split, right? If he fell out, I'd catch him. I'd be a hero. Not expecting it would never happen. The one time I turned the conversation, of course, he comes flying through the net head first, not stumbling backwards like I pictured. He's literally like flying. I remember I think his face was kind of like, ha, because he's flying through the air. All 20 kilos behind him, normal sized trampoline, so fairly high up off the ground, misses the grass, head first into concrete because he doesn't need to put his hands out because he's 18 months old. I get to him in 3 seconds flat, massive egg on his head. He's screaming and crying. I'm crying. So I'm like, I broke my son. I put him down like, buddy, this is really bad. You can cry as much as you want. This is a 10 out of 10. And then I did what any good parent would do. I went and got lollies. And went from like, started doing the crying. He's like, he calmed down. I put an ice pack on his head. He was fine. Then he hit me because I like rating stuff. I'm a big movie guy. Every movie I see gets a score out of 10. Every burger I have gets a score out of 10 because I'm a big burger. Even coffee, consumable things get a score out of 10. I'm like, what if we rated all of our problems? Because falling on your head is not a 10. It's not fun. Don't get me wrong. It could even be an 8 or a 9, depending on the severity of the fall. But we're talking about like a 10 out of 10 is the stuff that takes years to recover from. Okay. And lollies fixed him pretty quickly. So death, divorce, abuse, and things on top of this. That's a 10. And I was like, what if we had a scale? And I've had so many teachers even come back and going, oh gosh, I use this for my kids and it works so well. If we placed every problem that we face from 0 to 10 on a scale, and if we knew where to place them, we help our kids even early on. This goes here, this goes here, this is a 5, this is a 10. If we learn how to place them ourselves, and then when something happens and comes, we know when to ask for help. Because as an adult, we hit an 8 or 7 or an 8, we need to start reaching out and checking with the people in the inner circle. We hit a 10, we need multiple layers of support. Friends, family, inner circle, counselor or psychologist, we need therapy at that point. We need multiple layers. We are never meant to deal with that stuff on our own. We don't want to be people that have small reactions to big problems, right? When we hit a 10, no, I'm fine. And we're falling apart on the inside. This was me during my teenage years. I didn't know that I should be reaching out for help and asking for help. It's literally why I do what I do. We don't want to have anyone hitting a 0 or 1 and they're like, and they're falling apart with the tiniest little things. We don't want to have big reactions to small problems either, because even we get adults like that too, who've never learned any element of resilience. And so they're just reacting to every tiny little thing. We want to start to put this into practice for ourselves and, learning for this with this scale where the problems sit, helping other people to learn, especially our young people. But even talking about it within the office, like where do the problems sit? Where is this on the scale from 0 to 10? Not in a condescending way, but just as a reminder. I did it for years with my 13-year-old. He started getting about 8. And I've never seen him angry ever. He's, like I said, he's different, this child. I've never seen him angry. We watched Inside Out 2, and I'm like, so, Spud, when have you been angry? He's like, I don't know. And I legitimately have never seen him angry. Granted, I get him half the week. But the whole concept of placing problems on that scale, he's pretty good at now. And he'll be able to place them when I ask him now at the age of 13, which means as adults, we can all get it. Put our ego aside and go, okay, how do I learn from this? What can I take away? How do I get better at responding to my problems, not reacting and not allowing my emotions to be in control of me, which then betters so many other elements of my life. So that's kind of where we kind of pull to a close. To summarize, we're talking about the difference between reacting and responding. Those 2 stages that we addressed: the preparation stage, healthy relationships, self-awareness, and our thoughts, and the rebounding stage, choosing to stay calm, problem solving, choose what's right, and working towards responding to these problems so that we're not making emotional choices consistently, which trip us up all the time, right? Because emotions lie to us all the time. And ultimately, in relation to that problem, if it's too big and I'm going through these, 3 stages and it's just not working and I'm not managing this, we need to know when we need to ask for help when those problems become too big, because that's a key part about being resilient as well. Okay, that's the end of the presentation. I never really know how to finish these webinars because it's like, oh, I'm finished now. But I can work with my screen and we can kind of try and get the resilient scale up. But I'm
Okay.
happy to take any questions. We've got about 6 minutes left.
Yeah. So thank you, Adam. And now we have time for questions. Don't forget to use the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. While waiting for some questions to come in, I've got a couple of questions. The first thing is, and you touched on this right at the beginning, was, and the way I've interpreted it is around resilience, nature versus nurture. Do you find that some people are born with it and then can build on it? Are there some people who aren't born with it but can learn it? What's your interpretation of that?
I do. We're getting into, there are obviously some things, some conversations that are a bit polarizing, and some people have very strong beliefs on them. I find nature and nurture is one of them, not the strongest, of course, but it's one of them. I don't think it's one or the other. I think it's both. If I was to lean
Mm.
more one way, I would say nurture. 100%. We see stories about like that all the time. But I do find, and if I just think of my world and teenagers, I do find some kids are just they are naturally more resilient. They do naturally just deal with problems better. They're not typically as emotional. But how far does that go back? Is that because of how they've been nurtured? So I'd probably
Mm.
lean definitely more nurturing. The percentage wise, I don't know. I definitely think it's more nurture and the environment that we grow up in for sure.
Mm. But I think what I've taken from what you've spoken about is it's something we can all learn as well.
100%. Yeah. Like I said at the start, it's a skill that we can all acquire.
Hmm.
Everyone can work on it at any given stage of their life.
Yeah. Okay. And then, secondly, you talked about the three cushions, the
Yep.
shields, and how it's important to have the three elements there. And you said if we were to do one thing, it would be about building that core set of relationships.
Mm.
What's the second thing?
If I have to choose a second thing, I would choose. I'd probably want to assess my how often I'm reacting versus responding. I'd say that's probably the second most important thing. Um,
Hmm.
I just say that like it's the idea of being able to put people into the inner circle can freak people out sometimes, and especially if there's trust issues and there's things that have caused issues with trust in the past, and so that can be it means that it can be really difficult to put people in the inner circle. That's why I tend to start with that. It's
Mm.
something that we all need all the time. But
Hmm.
ultimately, if we pull back in terms of the presentation and what we talk about, that idea of being able to respond overall. So how often am I reacting? I would suggest would be the second most important thing.
Mm. Okay. So I've got some questions in the Q&A
Mm.
box. So firstly, one from Marcus. He says, I've never been afraid to ask for help or advice. However, lots of people and close friends do.
Yeah.
What
Yeah.
can they do to overcome that fear?
Um, I talk to young people about this all the time because it's a very common question. I kind of go back to something I said before, that the fact that um, most people that struggle to ask for help, um, I mean, there can be multiple things. There can be a lack of trust. So trust has been broken in the past. Then I can't trust anybody, especially with young people. I tend to hear that all the time. I think adults can be the same. There can be a fear of what are people going to think, fear of rejection. Ultimately, the fear side of it, if I speak directly to the question, there's a lot of self-esteem stuff going on there because that can often drive fear. I'm afraid of people's perception of me. I'm afraid of how people see me. If I'm an adult and I'm meant to have it all together, me, for example, I'm the resilience guy. Why do I need to ask for help? Because everyone needs to ask for help. And so I could have had a perception like I need to keep up a front and I need to look like I've got it all together all the time because I'm the resilience guy. So I need to be resilient all the time. It's completely the opposite. If I'm the resilience guy, I need to be modeling asking for help. And the fact that I know when this is too big for me and I can't manage it. So I'd be digging into what the fear is, what's behind the fear, why is the person afraid? Is it about losing face or how they look, or is it further consequence that they're afraid of? I'd start there, but then is there anything else other than fear? Is there a mistrust? You'd have to pick it apart and work on those things one at a time. The trust thing, counselor, psych, GP, there's a confidentiality agreement. Unless your life is in danger, they're not allowed to share it unless they lose their license. So, um, that's a really good place to build trust if it's a trust thing.
Hmm. Thank you. And then from Lauren, thanks, Adam, for a great presentation. Do you have any insights into what are the most common types of problems which people encounter at work, which causes stress and needs support?
Um, I I don't. I can think of it off the top of my head. I think each workplace would be slightly different. It would be based on the nature of the work, the um, the dynamics of the work, the team, the people that are involved. There are so many different contributing factors to what would cause stress, the person, individual. Um, so the most common, I'm not sure. I would imagine nowadays the fact that we can work offline means that those lines get blurred all the time, which means that would be a common cause of stress. I'm not getting things done quick enough. I need to be working at home. So there's not enough downtime. There's not
Mm.
enough recharging time. That'd be pretty common, regardless of the field you're in or the people you're working with. Or so if I had to pick off the top of my head, I'd say probably that one. But I would say it would determine. I'd be going if it was me and I was in a workplace and I was asked that question. I'd be asking everyone in the workplace. So tell me
Yes.
the things that you're stressed about. I'd be going individually to each workplace and pulling out what the stressors are so that we can then work on them as a workplace.
Okay. And then finally, resilience is often framed as essential to success, but does this overlook factors such as privilege, opportunity, or smart decision making? Do we sometimes overstate the importance of resilience? And if so, what are the potential downsides of this mindset?
A good question. Personal opinion, I don't think we overstate it. I think that whether you overstate it or not, would come down to your definition of it, I suppose. Some people might overstate it, but like I've defined, because it has to do with our problems, then it means that everyone needs resilience. Because I've seen people who don't have resilience in the way that they react and the way that life explodes because of a problem that they're facing, etc. Because there's no ability to deal with the problem in a healthy way. So I think it is essential for success. I don't think it. I don't think it's one or the other, right? I think that all the points that you've raised are important because privilege determines sometimes whether people have resilience or not, but sometimes it doesn't. Like I'm working with all types of schools, and there are really privileged kids that lack resilience like crazy because one of the contributing factors to especially young people lacking resilience is that parents don't allow the kids to fail. And so in a privileged environment, that is often the case where nothing's going to touch mother or Johnny. And so then they do everything to protect them, overprotect them, because every child needs protection to a degree. But then privilege creates a whole bunch of other set of problems, and one of those problems can be lack of resilience as well. Smart decision making, we talk about that all the time. I mean, if you just go to the last point about the decisions that we make, making decisions based on judgment, not emotions, that's important too. It's all a part of the conversation. I do think it is important I think it's important for success, but also just personal well-being. And I get success is important. I think personal well-being is even more important. I think that is where I sit and where I prioritize things. I think you sort out personal well-being, then success tends to sort itself out. It's my personal opinion.
Yeah, so all part of one package
Yeah, I agree. Yeah,
sometimes.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. Okay. Well, I think that we're just over an hour, so we'll wrap it up now. So thank you, Adam, for your insights today, and thank you to everyone who has attended. Our next webinar will be in March 2025, and the date will be listed on our website in the next few days. The theme will be leveraging events and sponsorships, and this will be given by Sarah Rashid from the Purple Giraffe Group in Adelaide. For all WCA members, recordings from previous webinars are held on our website under the education section, and I strongly encourage you to make use of that resource. If you have any suggestions on webinar topics that you would like us to cover in the program, please email us because we like to respond to the needs of our members. And that wraps us up for today. So thank you again for joining us and have a great rest of the day, everyone.